Hi everyone, welcome to another session of EOM Coach Conversations. And today I'm joined by Anastasia Griffith, and she's joining us live from Italy right now, where it's 11 a.m. and here in Pakistan it's 3 p.m. This series is where I bring coaches from all over the world to talk about something new every week. We talk about different things that affect our parenting and how we can move past that. And today I'm so excited because we're going to be learning so much new things. Even I'm going to be learning so much from Anastasia. We're talking about, and actually before we go on, Anastasia, can you give us a little introduction of who you are?
Hi. Well, thank you. I hope I can impart something that you've never heard before. I hope that's true. Yes, my name's Anastasia. I'm a conscious parent coach. Sidra and I trained at the same institute, which is called the Jai Institute for Parenting. I've been doing that work for a couple of years now. I'm a single mama to a 5-year-old boy who's very strong-willed, hence my inspiration for doing this work. And I've been an actress for 20 years. And so we'll speak a little bit about that. But the thing that I love working on the most with parents is helping them move through their stuck emotions. So I think it was Laura Markham, PhD, who's an author and creator of Aha Parenting. And she said the number one goal as a parent, after assuring that your kid is safe, is to manage your own emotions. And it's one of the greatest sort of influences we can have on our children and how we respond to them. And we're with them all the time at the moment, aren't we, Sidrat? So I know that this is particularly sort of apt at the moment where we all are sort of up against it and our buttons are being pushed a lot and we're not getting the time sort of on our own that we potentially used to have. And so it's even more important that we find ways of like resourcing ourselves and grounding ourselves, right?
Yeah. So let's start talking about reactivity first. We are talking about how our children are pushing our buttons. They're the ones you feel like you're past your, things that have happened in the past. It doesn't affect you anymore. There were times where you were like, oh, I'm angry at that person, but, it doesn't affect us anymore. But do you think that's really happening? Are we ever really past those things that we think we've healed?
I think we can get past them, but I think it takes presence. It takes real awareness. I want to go through a little bit of like what reactivity really is, like, things like that. But quickly to answer that question, I think it takes real awareness and even sort of go deep into the psychology of it. Jung spoke about the subconscious mind and how it's the driving force of our behavior. And we're only aware of like 97% of our brain capacity, like 97% of it is in the subconscious, which we pack down all these old experiences. And a lot of our patterning and our behavior is developed in our first 7 years, between 0 and 7, where our programming, right? So by the time we're 8 or 9, a lot of our belief systems are in place and how we perceive the world is in place. And so we're constantly reacting to that. But then that gets impacted with experience moving forward. And if we don't like that experience, we'll shove it down into our subconscious and it will be driving the show quite a lot of the time. But there are things that we can do about that. And that's what I love sort of working on is let's bring that stuff into the conscious mind where you can actually make a choice about how you respond. And so then I would just say, like, let's think of a really simple moment with our kids. I can think of one where you're dealing with them in a certain way, and then suddenly something happens and suddenly your demeanor towards them completely changes. Their behavior hasn't become different, but something shifted in you and you respond completely differently. And that's so confusing to children. So like one example is like when I was putting my kid to bed when he was about 2.5, 3, and he's never liked bedtime. And so he was like prancing around, jumping in bed, jumping out of bed, jumping in bed, jumping out of bed. And, some nights I can cope with that better than others. And on this particular night, I was sort of fine. And then something dinged on my phone and I looked at my phone and it was an email about a job, an acting job, because I'm an actress as well, that I didn't get. And suddenly this stress response came in my body about, I don't have enough money. I'm not going to be able to provide. And the next time he jumped out of bed, I was like, get into bed. And I started yelling. And he was totally stunned. Well, that reaction was nothing to do with him jumping out of bed for the third or fourth time. Yes, it was quite triggering maybe, but it was about what had happened on that phone, on my phone. And that's very old programming about fear, about money and safety and security. So things like that. We're always responding to stuff that is coming at us both internally and externally. You know, for lots of people, reactivity is quite a normal part of parenting. And that's probably because we were brought up with quite reactive parenting, because people didn't know about brain science like we do now. And so one of the most important questions to ask is, what is reactivity and why don't we want to be reactive? And I'd say reactivity is yelling at your children. I mean, it can go as so far as punishing and hitting and things like that, but really just raising your voice. And why do we get reactive? Well, first of all, it's because we don't know that it's not healthy for our kids, right? And so I just wanted to draw attention to this fight and flight response, because it can happen for us. And then when we yell at them, it creates that response in them, which basically means that yelling at your children is not effective. It doesn't achieve what you want it to achieve, because if they are having a stress reaction, which they will do to you raising your voice, they're going to go into fight and flight and freeze. And so you'll either get a kid freeze, they'll fight back, or they'll run away. They're not able to go into their logical brain, into that sort of prefrontal cortex, which is very underdeveloped in small children anyway. They're not going to go into that reasoning part of their brain to respond the way that you would like them to respond and do what you're asking them to do. In fact, they're going to go into their limbic brain, which they are no longer listening. So yelling at your kids is basically doing the exact opposite of what you want for them. And the exact same thing is happening for us when we have a stress response. And so what that might be is like you lose your sort of momentary control, and you might reflect back on the moment and think, I don't yell at my children. Why does this keep happening to me? Well, it's because you're going into that fight and flight. And that's something we'll talk about stress, how we handle stress, how we can bring these subconscious thoughts into the conscious mind, and how we can do in those moments to find presence, which will really help.
So let's start with those tools. Let's start with those tools that you have for us today. And how can you resource yourself when you're in that moment of reactivity? We've already talked about self-care in this series, and anybody who's watching, please go back and look at that. But what we're talking about today is a step ahead of self-care. It's not just like taking care of yourself, but can you shed light on how what we're talking about today is different?
And I really enjoyed it. There were things in there that wouldn't have occurred to me. Self-care is, it's an absolute essential for everyone, full stop. Anyone, a responsible human being, and who wants to care, to take care of themselves, that we need to do that. But it's sort of like a short-term, that's sort of a short-term solution to things. The more long-term way of looking at things is, how do we unpack these belief systems that are holding us back, or these perceptions that are holding us back, or indeed these stuck emotions in our which create tension and stress, which means we're constantly in this fight and flight, and we're not responding to things from our logical brain. So there's a things that we can do. One of my main passions is a thing called emotional freedom technique, or tapping, which is something I offer my clients in addition to the conscious parenting, because we work a lot with the unpacking of belief systems and bring it into the conscious mind just through repeating what people say, right? That's a lot of what we do in our work, is just being a mirror and reflecting it back to people. So if you have a belief system that my child is broken, which may have been something which you learned, that big emotions mean that you're broken when you're a child, right? If you learned that and you bring that into your parenting, suddenly every meltdown your kid has is somehow justifying or impacting that belief. And when you come to us and you start talking about, every time he does this, I get this physiological reaction, and I get really frightened because, like, what's wrong with him? Blah, blah, blah. So we'll start reflecting that back and be like, do you recognize now that this is a belief that's holding you back, that's keeping you stuck in this pattern with your child? Because the reality might be that your child is just having completely normal toddler tantrums, right?
Yeah.
So one level is just the art of awareness, and you can do that for yourself by doing something like journaling or meditation. Things can come very clear through things like meditation and mindfulness that you've got these certain belief systems that are keeping you stuck. But something like EFT tapping is an energy psychology that's working on the meridians in your body, much like acupuncture, on understanding that we keep the energy of emotion, the energy of thought, the energy of experience held in our bodies. There's a book called The Body, which is a fabulous resource, and I can't remember the name of the writer, which I really should, because he's like a leading guy in the world of psychology at the moment. But The Body Hold the Score talks about how if you want to access trauma and heal trauma, you have to go through the body, because the body remembers it all. And by going in, we get to experience it on a physical level that doesn't require the story, doesn't require the memory, but you can release it on that level and you can make massive breakthroughs. And by trauma, I don't necessarily mean that you were abused as a child. By trauma, I mean these little traumas that we accumulate, a breakup or stress as a child, a divorce, whatever it is, things that have impacted your belief systems. And so EFT works on the basis that we have these channels in our body, meridians, that go through various organs, and that by tapping the end point of those meridians, we have them all over our body, we can create a release. We can help find more in those systems. And in my experience, it can be very visceral, that you can literally feel things like moving, popping on a very physical level. And you can bring the intensity of emotions way down, from like down to that be coming back to myself.
No, that's very interesting. And is it something that you can demonstrate to us for people who are just learning about this? And is there something that they can do for themselves?
100%. So there are lots of resources online. There's a company called The Tapping Solution who do loads and loads of meditations. I do find it really helpful to have someone that you work with, because then you get to make it very specific to you. Just as a real basic, what we do is we'll go into our body and start looking at what's happening for you today. Or if it's something that's historical, like you have a tendency to really freak out at your kid in a certain scenario, you can go into the feeling that comes before you lose your temper, for example, and you can let that grow in your body, and you just go inwards and you access all of those feelings, and the memory will come, and physically you'll feel it. And then let's say that's bringing up like a heat in your chest and a closing in your throat. So then we would work on what's called a statement, where you tap the karate chop point of your hand, and you just tap it gently, and you say 3 times, even though I have this tightness in my throat and I feel like I'm about to scream, I love and accept myself unconditionally. You say that 3 times. And then we're going to do just a very basic, simple round. And you're going to go through the different points. And one is on the inside of the eyebrow. And you do a reminder phrase, which is like, oh, this closure in my throat. And on this one, you're just really going into your own experience, describing it. This tightness in my chest. Underneath, and that's the outside of the eye bone here. The eye. All of these intense feelings in my chest. Underneath the eye on the socket, underneath the nose and the dip here, you'd say something like, I feel like I'm about to scream. And then you go underneath the mouth in the dip there. And you say something like, I really don't want to scream. Why do I keep doing this? I feel so guilty. You're just going into the feeling. You're keeping on going into that feeling, because we have such a tendency to want to avoid our feelings. And when we avoid them, they just get more and more powerful, and they have more and more of a hold on us. This is where that conscious piece comes in. Mm-hmm. And then we go on collarbone, which is about an inch down from the clavicle and about 2 inches across. You can go from one side to the other side, both sides, in between. I often just do it in between like this. And this is a great point if you really do feel triggered, like in the moment when your kid is doing something and you're feeling really triggered, just to name it and tap on here and say, oh, I feel like I'm about to scream. I've got all this anger in my body. Just naming it will actually help move it through. And then under the arm, 3 inches down on the bra strap, if you're wearing a bra, if not, it's around that point. All of these intense sensations in my body. And then you go to the top of the head. And I just do it in a circle on the top. You can just do it in the middle, and you just name what's going on. I feel like I'm about to scream. And I would do that maybe 2 or 3 times. Then I take a really big deep breath in and just sort of let it all go. And then you take a measurement for yourself before and after, between 0 and 10, of how intense it is. And almost every time it's come down somewhat. Mm-hmm. So that is a tool, that's one of the tools. One of the things that tapping does is bring presence to what is happening inside. And I've just touched upon that, of like when we're running away, it's only going to chase us more. So bringing presence to what's going on, naming it, landing in it, giving yourself of care and empathy before you then react to what's going on externally, will be really beneficial. And then also this thing of I love and accept myself unconditionally. So lots of people say with tapping that you're naming all the really negative stuff. We don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And you're sort of bringing the shadow, like this, as Jung would say, the shadow, these repressed parts of you that you don't want to think about or touch, into light. And then you're giving them love, and you're saying, and I love myself just the way I am with all of this. That has a weirdly powerful effect on our physiology. It has it's like magic. And I know that in the UK, we're not super into like woo-woo, but it's really, it is really powerful in my experience.
I was going to say that too, because when I was doing the tapping, I've never experienced this before. I've never done this before, but I felt like a vibration coming back to me. Like, you talk about something called an aura and you don't want to believe it because what are these vibrations? But I felt those vibrations while I was tapping. And
I'm glad.
Yes, I'm really interested in learning more about this and diving into this further. But before we do that, I'm curious to know, so in our work with clients, a lot of the times we come across people, when we ask them to go into their bodies, they're just unable to do so. They'll stay in their head. I've experienced that with a lot of clients. What do you suggest for people like those when you can't get into your body? Are there any other things that they can do?
So often what happens for those clients is when they start doing the tapping, they're using things like I'm really angry. It's all very much in response to the external. And when we start to go in, they keep using thoughts rather than feelings. They're not giving me like feeling words. So what I'll do is I'll just take those thoughts and I'll ask them, like, where do you feel that in your body? Usually they can be like, oh, it's in my head, because they're thinking, and then I'll tap on that. I'll say, even though I feel like I'm being used in my head, and it can be completely abstract, by the way, none of it needs to make sense. If it's come out of your mouth and it makes sense to you, then that's what we're going to use. And you can tap on that. And they're normally like the intensity will be like a 4 or a 5. But when you've done a couple of rounds, the intensity goes up. And that's when I know that someone's like coming out of their head and back into their body. Suddenly the intensity will be like 8 or 10. And they'll be able to say, I just feel like I feel this discomfort. And so actually the process of tapping is bringing people back into their body. I mean, there are other techniques. Somatic experiencing is something that I really want to train in too, which is healing from the inside out, from the bottom up. as well. And that's just the art of like accessing sensations in the body and linking it to your internal and external world. So there are plenty of things, and there are really simple techniques that we can do at home, like self-care, meditation, journaling. But I invite people to even just start with this when something feels like they're getting into overwhelm, to just start on here. And even if the words feel like too much, or you're in public, just tapping on there will bring you back into your body a little bit. And it's when we get into that fight and flight, when our body is like ready to just run, which I think, to be honest, most of us are in most of the time at the moment, with all that external stress that we're hearing on the radio, or just seeing people in masks. All of this is putting us into fight and flight. So I would suggest that we could all use a little bit of this grounding.
Yeah. And I'm just going to add to that for people. I mean, this is amazing. This is such a new thing that I'm learning. And I'm sure a lot of my audience are hearing about this, if not for the first time, but in detail, in such, being demonstrated like this for the first time. So I invite everybody to look into this, to find a practitioner who can guide them through this. And there are other simpler techniques if you don't want to go this advanced. So for example, I invite my clients to move, just move through their feelings. Put on music if you have to, dance to your feelings. If you're feeling angry, just put on a rhythm that's going down, 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 so you can, shake it out. And even doing this with your children when they're aggressive and they're feeling like, there's too much building up inside of them, dance with them. If you don't want to dance with them, just walk around in your room, or if you can get out into nature, walk barefoot on grass, just go into nature. That sort of movement really helps. Have you ever tried that?
Yeah, I do that a lot. And actually for me, the tapping is a movement, because I often do it in the bath or whatever, but sometimes when it's intense, I have to move with it, and I will really use it in a movement based way. But I get my clients dancing a lot too. But I think it's important to register, like, some people are really in thought and that's like their thing, and to try and get them into their body is really useful. That can be movement. Some people might find that drawing is the thing, like just painting it out. Other people might be like, it's sensory. So maybe like being in a dark room or being in a brighter space, or like they might, so it's just figuring out what you respond to. But
exactly.
I think like exercise, physical movement, getting back into your body, grounding, these things will really help with reactivity.
Definitely. And before we went live, you were sharing this, your own experience, how your life experiences have brought you to this. I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because that was so relatable.
Yeah. So, well, you were asking what my background was, and I've been an actress for 20 years. So yes, I came to conscious parenting really through my kid. But before that, I was really passionate about psychology. I did a foundation in psychology at an interpersonal psychology school up in California. And I realized in hindsight, the reason why I went down this path of like self-care, self-help, psychology, like self-realization, was because I found acting to take me on so many journeys that really weren't mine. And that neurologically, now that I understand it, neurologically, our brains don't know the difference between a made-up scenario that isn't real and what's actually happening to us. And especially when you're working on camera, your truth is here. You've really got to be able to be feeling it. And I was always playing like drug addicts and people who were being like in all sorts of highly dramatic scenarios. Excuse me. And let me just quickly take a sip. And I realized that my body was having all of this stress. I was always in fight and flight. I was always trying to figure out, I was coming out in hives and rashes, and I was diagnosed with Lyme's disease at one point. God knows if that was really true. But the way I healed all of that was doing this kind of work. And I realized that we so often, as actors, are putting ourselves in these very tense situations that we are absorbing in our bodies, and our body doesn't know the difference. And you made a really good point about in general in life.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring this back into conversation was because when she was talking about how being an actress has so much stress, and our body is taking all of that in neurologically, I observed how this isn't just this life on camera or the real life, REEL, but in real life, REAL. In real life, we're still playing so many roles. So many of us are, we've put on these masks, we're hiding behind these cloaks, and we've been doing this since childhood because we didn't get the love or the approval or the acceptance from our caregivers that we needed at that time. And we could only get it if we acted a certain way, if we only behaved a certain way. So we've all, in a way, been acting all our lives, and our bodies have been taking in this stress, and our neurological systems are now designed to go into that fight, flight, or flee mode. And that is why we are so reactive with our kids. And we need to be able to release this by going into our body. So our takeaway from our session here today with Anastasia is that there are many ways, but one of the most effective ways of doing this is EFT tapping. I'm certainly going to be looking into this more after this session. I'm probably going to be taking some sessions from Anastasia herself to do this work on myself.
I'm offering free sessions, Sidrak, because I'm in the end part of my training where I have to do 50 free hours. You can get it for free. That's the best bit. Right. And I just want to add to what you just said. What came up for me from what you just said was authenticity, right? Maybe, that really is the little nugget of takeaway that I'm taking, which is the more we can be completely authentic and allow that for our children, that acceptance of our children for who they are, and give them the gift of that authenticity, then they are not having to impose these masks, personas that are stressful for our body to carry.
Yes. And this is the work that we're doing as coaches. We're allowing you to break free of those masks and step into your authenticity so that your children don't have to carry this burden, the same burdens that you've been carrying. Just to finish that thought, I'm signing up with Anastasia. And whoever else wants to sign up, Anastasia, where can we find you, and what is the help that you can provide?
Yeah, so I am at www.inkinship.com. So in kinship, kinship.com. That's my website. I'm also the same tag on Instagram, or Anastasia Griffith on Facebook, which you can then join into my community group, which is Kinship Conscious Parenting Community. So any of those ways you'll get me. You just message me and I will send you a link for either conscious parenting, which I offer one-to-one sessions or group sessions, or just the EFT, which, like I said, for about another 25 hours, I am offering for free, and I am loving it. I'm loving it. So I would love to get as many of you as possible in, and I can do multiple sessions with each person. So please, sign up, sign away.
Yes, that's lovely. And I'm going to put all of that information on the comment section or in the description so that it's easier for anybody else who's watching to find you. Do leave a comment. Tell us if you tried this. Let me know how it went for you. If you're just as intrigued as I am to explore this further. And if you're watching this on YouTube later, please share this with your friends and family, and do subscribe. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Sidrak, can I mention that I'm doing a free talk on Zoom next Wednesday, all about parenting without punishment, going from conflict to cooperation. And I'd love anyone who's curious about this work to come on and have a conversation with me and listen to that presentation. It'll be very interactive. I just wanted to put that out. It's Wednesday the 17th, and it's completely free.
Yeah, that's another invitation, and we're going to put the information for that in the comment section as well. Thank you everybody for watching, and I'll catch you again next week with another coach and another interesting topic. Bye.
Bye.